Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Teresa. This is Lost My Thread. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the details of how I made my M7969 for a 70s themed summer party. I have mentioned this party in previous videos. The party that I went to recently, it was thrown by the New Craft House, which is a fabric shop in London. They do throw parties pretty frequently. There usually is a theme, and this summer the theme was peace and love. So the idea was that if you wanted to dress on theme, you would make something that was a bit 70s, a hippie kind of a vibe, summer of love, that kind of a feel. And you didn't have to dress on theme, but I will say I've always had a bit of a thing for a 70s style, and it definitely seemed like a great opportunity to make something really fun for the party. And the dress that I picked was the M7969. This is a super popular pattern. So many people have made it. I've seen so many gorgeous versions. I will say that it wasn't one that I was necessarily gonna leap to. For one, I hadn't sewn with big four patterns in a while, and there's a reason for that, but I'll get to that in another video. The other things are that I knew it was going to take a lot of adjustments. Anything with a crossover section is always a little bit tricky to fit over my bust. I mean, probably most everyone, to be fair, but there is a tendency for things to look a little bit too low cut. I fall out a little bit more than I'm happy with. So I knew this was going to take some muslins. I also knew that in general, I didn't know how much I was going to wear this style on the day-to-day. The reason I ended up going for this one though is because I actually have had this pattern for free. So Minerva is a fabric website in the UK. If you sign up for a Minerva account, you get this pattern for free. So it kind of seemed like, why not go for it? So I did end up making a couple of muslins, and I'm going to show you the process of how that all went. But I will say on the whole, I think this dress turned out so well. It was perfect for the party. I did make some adaptations to the pattern. So the one that I was most drawn to, which is the one I've seen the most, is the one with these massive balloon sleeves. And there is a gathered sleeve band around 3/4 of the length down the sleeve. But because this was going to be a 70s style thing, I decided that I would extend it. So the sleeve goes all the way to my wrist. I didn't do the gathering, so I have this big bell sleeve thing. But the plan is that I will then adapt this to be the balloon sleeve to make it more wearable and potentially make some other changes to the dress so that it's not necessarily as costumey for the day-to-day. But it was so perfect for the party. The fabric that I used is just a dream. I cannot go over how wonderful this fabric is to wear. I'll show you a piece of it, but obviously you can see it on me anyway. So this is a Fabric Godmother viscose fabric, and it is just the most incredibly light and soft and drapey fabric. It is just incredible to work with, honestly. It is slightly sheer, so I worried that it was going to be a little bit inappropriate for this dress. I might have to wear a slip. I didn't line this at all. With the bodice, it's no problem. If you wear a flesh tone bra, you're going to get away with it without any problem. The skirt worried me a little bit, but there's so much gathering. It's like a 2-to-1 ratio, so it's like twice as long the skirt as the bodice section. So it gathers so much. I don't think it's an issue at all. And I love that you have that huge full gathers in this gorgeous drapey fabric. I did get this fabric from Guthrie and Ghani because Fabric Godmother themselves are actually sold out of it, even though they designed it. There was a little bit of a drama with my fabric, so I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But the first thing I really want to get into is what adjustments I made just right out of the packet. So from looking at the pattern, knowing what I might need to alter. So in addition to altering the sleeves, I also drafted some pockets because this dress does not come with pockets. What's that about, guys? So I drafted some pockets that attach up into the bodice section so that the whole thing attaches, so it's not a floppy pocket either. That worked out really well, and I made some major alterations to the bodice itself. So I'm going to cut to some footage of me talking through what I did. So this is my front bodice piece. I feel like this angle, it's a 45-degree angle, that to me seems a little bit too steep. This line here, it's called the center front, is where the two sections are supposed to overlap, so the left and the right are supposed to come together. So I'm going to use that as a useful reference point. I have marked my seam allowances here just so I can be really clear on what I'm referring to, and because this is a raglan sleeve, this doesn't go up to the shoulder seam. this is my sleeve, and this is the center point on the shoulder, and there is a little dot here where these two pieces are supposed to match up. So that's going to be the front of the shoulder, and then that's going to become the bodice. I have got another pattern that I want to refer to. So this is a wrap, this is a genuine wrap top. So this is a faux wrap, but this is a genuine wrap top that I know fits me well, and particularly fits well across the bust. And I know that the crossover section doesn't reveal too much, but it's really comfortable to wear. This is the peppermint wrap top, so it's designed by In the Folds for Peppermint magazine, and I have marked up my seam allowances here, which are a bit narrower, so I want to use the seam allowance of the pattern as my reference. So what I want to do is lay one pattern on top of the other. I'm going to just fold it at that center shoulder seam, and that's going to go to the top of the shoulder seam here, and follow it around more or less along the curve. And then if I can line up this dot with the dot on the bodice, these are the bits that I'm interested in now. So I can get rid of that. I'm interested in how this matches with this. I can pivot it depending if I need to, but I'm gonna keep my finger on that point. So the key thing that I wanna do to compare these two is make sure that the grain line is level, because if this is angled, then obviously it's not gonna be how it's gonna fall on my body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the grain line here. The grain line is equal to this center front line, so they're the same, so I can line up that center front. So what I can see here is that there's a similar drop down at the top of the bodice, but definitely this, and particularly in the area where the overlap is, it's significantly lower on the McCall's dress than it is on the peppermint wrap top. So what I'm going to want to do is just basically trace out to some degree, particularly to where that center point is, and then I can try and maybe just angle it down so that it can just join onto the skirt as it should do. So I can actually see, I'm sure it's probably not as easy to see on the screen, but I can see and I can feel where this line is, and I particularly, like I said, I want to look at where it's supposed to cross over and make sure at that point it's at a similar point, and then I'll take it from there. So that is the angle that it's going. So what I will say is this piece underneath actually has a shorter seam allowance, so 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so I would theoretically want this 1/4 inch over from where it is. And that ends up being a reasonably easy curve to grade to at that point. So I'm going to be working with this one further out that's got that little bit of extra seam allowance added on. I'm going to also just extend this waistband over, the waist seam. So I'd say that that's a pretty significant difference. In the spot where it's the crossover, it's actually going to be crossing over 1 1/4 inches higher than it would have been. So I'm definitely glad that I've made that adjustment, and that's just going to be what I'll do for my first muslin. So I did end up starting from a pattern that I already had that I knew worked for me, which is a really good way to go, I will say, just to have a bit of an idea if things are likely to work or they're not. If you have a pattern that works for you, whether it's a knit or a woven, depending on what you're working with, or even a garment that you wear, that you purchase, that you know fits you well, it can be useful just to compare it to the pattern pieces. I did show you also how you can make those adjustments if you don't have the actual pattern in a later video, but right now I want to show you how my first muslin turned out. So hopefully you can get enough of an idea. I've just pinned down this binding just because it was kind of flipping out and I felt like it was just distorting the look of the whole thing. This is just to give you an idea of how it will sit when it's on properly. Now, as far as the crossover section, it's definitely lower than I would feel comfortable at the moment, but I've got these lines, which is where it was supposed to be joining together. It joins together, you might not be able to see at the base, these lines that are supposed to be the crossover points, these do match down here, but up here it's splaying apart, and I think that's honestly just because my bust is wanting to pull it. So I do think I probably need to do a bit of a full bust adjustment, which isn't massively surprising. I was doing a bit of a cheat to get away from it. And I will measure what the distance is between these two lines to see how much I feel like I need to add in there. The other thing is I feel like in general, it's just a bit baggy. It's not sitting very flat. So what I want to do is I'm going to pinch out sections, and then it's automatically now sitting just a lot flatter, so I'm a lot happier with that. That's a bit of a gaping neckline issue. I think this is happening really because I was going with the size based on my full bust measurement, but I know that it's also drafted for a smaller bust cup size. So if I had sized with the one that was going to match my high bust measurement, it was going to end up way too tight across the bust. I mean, it's still too tight across the bust. I am going to look to see about adding some width into the bust area, but I don't need it in the back. So I didn't necessarily need to do a bigger size. I just need to account for that. So those are the general adjustments that I'm going to make. I am pretty happy with where this is sitting, but I do think under the bust it's kind of pulling up a bit again. So no big surprises. I think I have an idea of what I need to do. So I will show you how I'm going to do that on the paper. Now, if you don't have a wrap top that works well for you, what I've done is I've basically just extended 4 inches onto the end of this wrap section, and then 4 inches from the top of the bodice I have then drawn a dot, or you could make a point, and then you're going to connect those two to get this additional wedge shape. So that's basically how I got to where I was if I didn't have another pattern piece there. So I've got my pattern piece here, comparing it to my muslin so that I can just mark some lines over. Where I pinched out the bodice here, this section needs to be marked at either end and then flattened out again. So I did that here already. Because I have this section folded over, it's not going to go up to the top edge because I've got this binding still on there, but the bottom still should match up. And this was where it was pinched, just like this. So I made a little pencil mark on either side, opened it out, and then I transferred those markings to here. So that's how much I'm going to need to pinch out on each side. I also marked where my apex was, the apex of my bust, fullest part of my bust. Now, the reason I've done that, I've been following a tutorial for the By Hand London Hannah dress, which is a wrap dress, about how you can reduce gaping in the bust line, but that assumes you already have a bust dart. So what I'm going to do is do my full bust adjustment first to create a bust dart, and then I'm going to take that out, pinch that out, and add the fullness into the dart. So using my apex point as the main point, what I'm expecting is that my bust dart is going to go out to the side seam here. So what I will do is just make a straight line. I feel like I may as well stay in line with the grain line. I'm also going to make a line parallel to that grain line from the bust point down to the waist seam. You then usually want to make a line from that point up until it's usually about 1/3 of the way up an armhole, but because it's a raglan sleeve, it's a little bit different. But I'm basically just going to angle this up anywhere along here. As long as it's not sort of in the top half of it, you're probably going to be fine. So I'm going approximately here. It's about 1/3 of the way from the side seam. You then want to draw another line that goes from this vertical line out to the front of the bodice, or to the center of the bodice. And this doesn't need to be any particular place. Usually, again, about 1/3 of the way down is where people tend to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and just make these marks in a darker color to make it a bit easier to see. So I'm going to do a lot of cutting to be able to spread this out and add as much fullness as I need. So I'm going to cut along this vertical line up into the point, and then turn up until I get to the seam allowance here, just before I get to the seam allowance here. I then also want to be trimming just up to the seam allowance at that point, so I'll have a little hinge point. From the outside on the side seam, I'm going to cut right up until this point as well, and I'm going to cut this whole section off as well. So I've taped together some scrap paper here just so that I can give myself a little bit of wiggle room. But the idea here is that this is your little pivot point, so that can adjust. Your seam line is not going to get any longer or shorter. The cut line might get a little bit narrower if it's angled more like that, but your seam line will still then fit onto the arm piece that you mean it to. So when I measured my bodice and saw where it was pulling over by, it was 2 inches in total, which means I need to add 1 extra inch onto each of these bodice pieces. So I'm going to start off just by taping this straight line down. And then as you adjust this, it's going to increase space in a variety of areas. The area that I'm most interested in is from here. I want to make sure that I'm giving 1 extra inch in that space, and then that will add the extra fullness here and into this area, which will become my dart. So I want to make sure that I'm adding 1 inch along this line. I basically need to adjust. I want everything to sit flat until this is giving me exactly along that line that I've drawn. Now this section needs to basically be the joining line between these two. So it's going to be on this same vertical line, and it looks like it then matches up well on the grain line and the center front line as well. Now theoretically this kind of looks like it's done, but this area that has become essentially the bust dart is pointing down here, whereas my bust apex is up here. So I am going to want to move the point of the dart. You usually want to have the dart about 1 inch away from your apex. So I'm going to move it a little bit down and a little bit out by about 1 inch, and that is going to be the new center dart point, and these are going to be the edges of the dart. So this is now our new dart. I'm not going to add the end there, the little hat with the little end onto the dart yet, because we're still going to mess with it, because we have this extra gaping here that we want to remove and add the fullness into the dart. We have also added a bit more length onto this section, so I'm not sure if we may end up with a bit more gaping in this area that we might need to then remove. But I feel like for now I need to just do not a ton of changes at once. I'm already doing quite a bit as it is. So what I'm going to do is just make a muslin after I have removed that fullness, and then we'll see where we're at. So I need to make some more lines. So I'm going to make a line connecting from the bottom of this area that I want to remove to the tip of the dart. And then I'm also going to be drawing a line from here out to the center of the dart. I'm then going to cut from here to the tip of the dart, not quite, but more or less to the tip of the dart, and the same from the outside to about the tip of the dart. All right, so this is probably going to look a little familiar because it's not that hugely different from what we've just done, but I'm going to be pivoting this line to meet that other point so that we're removing that excess, and that's going to fill out the excess, so increase the wideness of that dart, so it's going to shift that fullness. So as this pivots, you can see that that's opening up over that way. So just to explain what we're looking at, because I feel like it looks a little bit messy at the moment, this red triangle is still the dart, but it's quite a lot bigger than it was before because we've removed the excess in this gaping neckline and transferred it into the dart. There are still a lot of just excess bits hanging around, so what we need to do is just to true everything up, which basically means just kind of neaten the edges and trim what doesn't need to be there. And this is my actual pattern piece. This other stuff was just there for the added paper I needed to put in there, and I don't need it anymore, so I'm just going to trim it right down the bottom edge. This line has gone a little bit jaggedy, as has this. This has gone a little bit more of a funny angle. So I'm just going to add a little bit more paper here and try and smooth both of these sections out a little bit. I'm big on using the scraps that I've trimmed off because I do not like to waste any of my scraps. This line, this vertical line here, this purple one, hopefully you can see there, that is where the two sections are meant to cross over. So anything I adjust from this point is going to be tucked under or over, as it were, the other bodice piece, but it's not going to increase the amount of gaping there or make it any more revealing. So I don't have to worry so much if I make it more of a steep angle there. So what I'm going to want to do is just make that as smooth of a transition as I can. I think I'm happy with that line. So I'm happy with that as just being a little slight curve there as it goes down, and then it's a pretty straight angle. So the only thing I have to do now is to work out when I'm folding this dart together, there's going to be a bit of fabric that's going to poke out and then get folded in half. So I need to create that. So I need to fold this dart close, like as if I was making a dart, and see how these two line up on the edge. So I'm going to just make a poke through with a pin on one side, and then fold this in half and poke it through, coming out on the other side. And I want to fold it along that whole dart line. And then you need to actually fold it along the dart line. I want to go for the bottom dart because I have heard from Cashmerette that if you fold darts upward, it just seems to suit a fuller bust a bit better. So this is my, basically like my 3D version. And what you need to do is just to trim to connect these seam lines together. And then when you open it out, that gives you that little carrot section, that little top section that goes onto the top of the dart. And as you will see, the second muslin turned out so much better, and I'm going to show you how that looked on me now. I've got to say, I'm pretty chuffed. I am liking how this looks. I can show you now without a top underneath, which is definitely a good sign. There's definitely a lot more room here, and the section that's supposed to be crossing over, so this line is supposed to cross over this line, sits where it is supposed to now. I've got the bust dart there, which you can see, and I think that just gives me a lot more room in this vicinity. I like where this is sitting. There is a slight curve to it because of the area that I pinched out, and that is sitting way more flat now. I feel like this is crossing over in a really good spot for me. Even if I lean forward a bit, it's not gaping open. So I feel like I've nailed it, guys. Obviously, you'll have to excuse the different fabrics that I've got. I'm using scraps. That's what muslin is all about for me. But I am really liking the look of this. This is way better than I thought I was going to get with this dress, which is kind of ridiculous. Why would I want to make it? But seriously, this looks really good. I was so much happier with the second muslin and definitely ready to go ahead and cut into my fashion fabric. And when I went to go do that and started to sew all the pieces together, I made a bit of a beginner error. It happens, guys. We all make these mistakes, but I was pretty annoyed with myself. I cut out two of the same right bodice pieces, and there was no way to salvage it. Basically, I was going to have my left bodice piece inside out, if anything. I needed more fabric. I didn't have any more fabric. I got the absolute most I could out of the fabric that I had, and so what I needed to do was order more fabric. At this point, I was about a week away from the party, so I was conscious that time was not really on my side with shipping, and then also hoping to get it all sewn up and make any adjustments if I needed to. So I put in an order with Guthrie and Ghani, who I'd ordered the fabric from, just for as much fabric as I needed. So I measured the bodice piece along from here to there. Looked like I needed, I think it was 40 centimeters of fabric. So I ordered 40 centimeters of fabric. I left a little note in the order saying, please, this is for an upcoming party. I don't have a lot of time. If you can expedite this order, I'd really appreciate it. And I got a phone call the very same day from someone at Guthrie and Ghani saying, we've got your note. We have everything packaged up. We're gonna send it today. Can we just double check? Can it be any old piece? Does it matter for pattern matching or anything? Which was so nice of them to think of. I was so grateful that they asked me that question. I wasn't worried about pattern matching because it's the crossover sections. It didn't need to be matching anything. So I said, whatever you got, send it through. Thank you so much. It arrived the next day, and another error, guys. I had completely mixed up which direction the stripes go. This is the salvage. So the stripes go horizontally. As you can see, I wanted my stripes vertically. So this size piece wasn't gonna work. I needed the width of the piece from here to here, and this was not wide enough. There was no way I was gonna be able to fit the bodice piece onto this. I was pretty upset. I didn't really know what to do at this point. Tell you guys, I was too embarrassed to order again from Guthrie and Ghani. I know they would have been really nice about it, and I'm sure they would have laughed. I just couldn't go through it. So I ordered from another fabric shop called Ray Stitch, which I've never ordered from before. This fabric is around, but I will say it's not hugely available. I ordered it from Ray Stitch without any phone calls. I didn't leave any notes, and it still arrived the next day, which was wild. So I did have time to get this dress sewn up because I had a day off before the party. I worked, I got it all done, and I am so happy with how it came together. I did do a little bit of extra footage to talk you through how my initial fit was, because I did make some minor adjustments to the fit, and I'll show you that now. I was hoping to be able to show you the full length, but I really just cannot get there, unfortunately, with the space that I've got. I think it's beautiful, but it needs some work. So it's pretty massive around the waist area, which I knew it was going to be. It is supposed to be oversized. The pockets are wonderful, by the way, but I feel like I need a little bit more definition in my waist. So I'm going to try and see if I just pin some elastic around here, see if I can bring it in a little bit, and then feel a little bit happier with the shape that it's giving me. As far as the V-neck, it's pretty doggone good. I will say I'm feeling a lot happier with this as it is with the elastic. I think I could even tighten the elastic a little bit, but I can play around with that, but I don't think I need to remove any of the gathers on the skirt. I mean, it is pretty magnificent to have that fullness in the skirt, and I don't want to lose it if I don't have to lose it. So I think what I'm going to do is basically do like a French seam, but before I finish sewing up the second seam, I'm going to leave a little gap and insert some elastic in there and then stitch that closed. So that way I'm basically creating an elastic channel by just using the seam allowance I've already got. So my plan with making a elastic channel from a French seam worked really well with 1/4 inch elastic. I think it fits really great. It's super comfortable, still really easy to get on and off over my head. I feel like I should mention as far as sizing, I did actually size down from what was recommended. So I went for a size medium. I have a high bust of 33 inches, full bust of 38 inches. I have a waist of 31 inches and a hips of 42 inches. So if you look on there, I should clearly have made the size large. I sized down to the medium. It's still really big. So just bear that in mind. I'm really happy with the size that I picked and the adjustments that I made with my elastic channel. So I would totally make it again just the way that I did, but maybe give a wider channel for the elastic and not make it quite so tight with the French seam. But still, I feel like it turned out perfectly. It absolutely had the 70s vibe that I was going for, especially with the flower crown. So I did share a video recently on how to make a flower crown because I made it for this party, and it is definitely the icing on the cake for this whole outfit. The crown held up through the whole party. I did stick some bobby pins in just to keep it in place, but it was fine when I was walking around. It got blown around and I felt fabulous. The party, I will say, was such a cool experience. It was my first time going to a party with other sewing people. I'd met somebody at like an exhibition before, but I'd never actually gone to a party, a get-together, just with sewists, and it was kind of magical. So I did meet some people, some vloggers, some other sewists I didn't know before. I have met Amelia of Sew Amelia before, so it was great to catch up with her again. I met Liz, the baker that sews, who I'm sure you guys know all these vloggers because they're fabulous and you should be following them if you're not. I met Louise, who was one of the pattern pals who has Ethel and Joan buttons. It was great to talk to them, but like I said, I also talked to lots of other people who I either know through Instagram or are brand new friends to me now, which was really, really cool. It was just so inspiring as well because most of everything everyone was wearing was me made. I felt like I just wanted to take in all of the clothes and all of the fabrics and touch all the fabrics. It was really wonderful to be able to talk through the details of garments with people who understood it as well. There were some sewing celebrities, I would say, that I didn't talk to because I had no particular reason to chat with them, but it was just cool to see Manyi from the Great British Sewing Bee. She was in the final from this year. Elisa Lex, the designer behind By Hand London. Sandeep, the owner of Sister Mintaka. Really cool to see them, and there was a really fun moment where they got everyone who wanted to put their garments forward for the Best Handmade Garment Award. Went in, did a little twirl in the middle of the room, talked through what their garment was. So I was able to get some really fun details of some incredible makes that people made. And there was a winner. Liz, the baker that sews, actually won a prize. She was the best handmade garment, which was completely perfect. Her dress was incredible. She made a matching bag that was amazing. On the whole, I have to say it was a great experience. I absolutely plan to go to more social sewing events. I highly recommend it to anybody else out there if you're thinking about it, even if you're feeling a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure. Sewing people are just so nice, and if you love sewing, I guarantee you will always have something to talk about when you get together with somebody else who sews. As I mentioned, I am planning to make some adjustments to this dress to make it a little bit more wearable and not quite so costumey. So I'll be sharing the details of how I do that and giving a bit of a detailed review of this pattern. There were definitely some issues I had with the pattern instructions and construction, so I will talk to you guys through all that in a future video. Please do give me a like if you enjoyed today's video. Leave me a comment down below about what you think, if I was on theme for my 70s party, if you think I nailed it, if you think there's anything I could have done a bit differently. Please tell me too if you've been to any kinds of sewing social events, you've got any upcoming. It's just so fun to hear about everyone else's experience of getting to meet each other in the real world and not just virtually. Please do subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. I'll see you all soon. Bye!